Hi, so my name is Simon. I work for Eclipse Source, and today I would like to talk to you about our open source project Theia Cloud, and specifically highlight the progress and contributions that we have made on the road to the 1.0 release of the project. But first, let's take a step back and take a look at what Theia Cloud actually is. And it is a framework, and like the name indicates, it's there for deploying your Theia applications to the cloud. What that means is that with Theia Cloud, you can host your Theia-based applications for your end users without them having to install it on their machines. And it's important to note here for this talk that this is an open source project. And since we want to talk about the road to the 1.0 release, let's quickly take a look at the project's timeline here. So we started in February of 2021 with the initial contribution where the main functionality of Theia Cloud was introduced. And then about 2 years later, or 1.5 to 2 years later, at the end of 2022, the first production deployments actually went live. What this means is that the first adopters of Theia Cloud were then actually using Theia Cloud to ship their or to host their applications to their end users. And now we are in the fall of 2024, so around about 2 years later, and we recently moved the project to the Eclipse Foundation and are preparing for the 1.0 release, which is upcoming. Now, the question might arise, what happened in these last 2 years? Because basically Theia Cloud has been used in production even during its beta phase without a proper 1.0 release. And the main reason why this worked is that the core functionalities of Theia Cloud were already well established 2 years ago, meaning that it just worked. So you were able to do all of the stuff that you would expect from the framework back then. And this led to a lot of confidence in Theia Cloud from our side, but also from the side of the adopters, even without a proper full release, so to say. However, we decided in the beginning that we want to make sure that 3 essential pillars for the Theia Cloud projects are taken care of before doing the full release. And those are namely efficiency, flexibility, and maintainability. And 2 years ago, in these 3 pillars, basically some non-functional requirements were still missing. And so we wanted to focus on these before making the full release, indicating then that we are now more happy with the state of these 3 pillars than we were 2 years ago. What I want to do next is go over these 3 topics and discuss what some requirements are for these pillars and what we did in order to now be much more happy with the state of the project in regards to those topics. Starting with efficiency, and we can take a look at it from 2 different perspectives. So first of all, the one from the adopter, who uses Theia Cloud to host Theia Cloud, its Theia applications. And as an adopter, I would like to be able to get started quickly. I want a solution that is easy to use, and I actually want to focus on what I really need. I don't want to spend time configuring stuff I don't use in the end or I don't need. And the second perspective we can look at this is from the end user, and for those similar things are important, like they also want to get started quickly, but then once they get started quickly, they want to have good performance as well. And most importantly, they want a reliable solution. So it does not matter, or it's a bad solution if there are a lot of downtimes, for example, because then the user cannot use the tool he would like to use when he wants to use it. And derived from those requirements, we focused on the last 2 years on improving the configuration values, so the values that you put into your Theia Cloud deployment, just making sure that they don't overlap, that they are separated from each other, and that you only need to configure what you really want to configure and what you only need. And for the rest, there are useful default values that you can just keep. Then we focused on reducing maintenance windows, for the adopters, so that they don't need to spend so much time updating, but more importantly for the end users, so that if the adopter updates something on the cluster, it does not take that long and the end user can start much more quickly again, working with the hosted Theia application. And then lastly, we focused on decreasing the startup time for the end users and also for the whole deployment so that it is just much more faster to work with. Regarding flexibility, we will just take a look at it from the perspective of the adopter. Of course, we could also take a look from the contributors or maintainers of Theia Cloud, but that's not too important here. So let's focus on the adopters. They don't want to customize their deployment. They then also don't want to hit any roadblocks down the line. So basically, it is not a good solution if after a few years you notice that you cannot do something because you're stuck with a solution that you decided to go with a few years back. Then I want to be able to report bugs or even want to become active and contribute features to the solution, which is, like I already said, an open source project. So that is possible. And for this, we focused on the reusability of the code. So we split library functions from default implementations so that if a default implementation does not work for you, you can just create your own implementation with the library code. Similarly, we provided custom fields in resources, so you can reuse our resources even if you need to adapt them or add something to them. And lastly, we focused on improving the documentation and code structure to make it easier to report bugs and contribute features. Lastly, for maintainability, now we can actually take a look at it from the perspective of a contributor to Theia Cloud or a maintainer. You can sort of use those interchangeably. As a contributor, I want a well-documented project. I want good structured code just to get started quickly. Then when I do changes, I want the ability to test them. And lastly, I want a proper CI to test, build, and publish. Now, this is, of course, more important to the maintainers than the contributors, but still it's nice to have because you don't have all of these manual steps that you have to do over and over again. And then we can also take a look at it from the perspective of the adopters who want a solution that is scalable. They want to know about changes that happened in Theia Cloud and what they need to do to consume those changes. So are there any breaking changes, for example? Then they want to leverage the wisdom of the crowd. And what we mean by that is that they don't want to spend time fixing issues, especially because this is an open source project that other people have already spent time on fixing. So a concrete example for this would be security. So if I use the solution, I would like to have a baseline of security. And ideally that should come from or partly come from experiences that other adopters had made in the past and added their experiences to the project. And to make sure that maintainability is given, we focused on improving the documentation, providing a proper change log so that you know when updates happen, what has changed and what you need to do. The versioning of components, so all of the Theia Cloud components are now versioned the same way, so you know what is compatible with what. And as a bonus point here, we also release at the same time points than the community releases of Theia. So and also then test with the newest community release of Theia. So you also always know which versions of Theia are compatible with what versions of Theia Cloud. Then this I really want to highlight. So we really focus on feedback-driven improvements. So if somebody suggests a change or an improvement to some of the components in Theia Cloud, then we really take a look at if this is something that the whole community would benefit from and then try to integrate it in a way that it's usable for all adopters. And then lastly, for the security aspect, we are actually performing a stride analysis, which is just a framework to assess risks in web applications or in a cloud deployment, and derived some improvements that we could make there and also made them for Theia Cloud. So since I'm coming to the end of my time, I would like to quickly recap what we talked about. So Theia Cloud has been in deployment has been deployed in production for almost 2 years now. During the time, we spent a lot of time on improving many non-functional requirements, just so that the project is also better from a usability perspective if you use the project and not the end product. Many of those were actually based from the wisdom of the crowd, like I explained earlier. Recently, we moved the project to the Eclipse Foundation, where we are actually a subcomponent of the Theia project. So if you are already a contributor or even a committer to the Theia project, it's really easy to get started contributing to Theia Cloud, which contributors are, of course, always welcome. And I want to remind you that the 1.0 release is coming up. So if you're looking for a solution that is fully released, that lets you deploy your Theia applications to the cloud, then keep an eye out for that. And here are some links that might be of interest to you. So this is for one, the website, our demo application where we host Theia Cloud, and my email if you have any questions about that talk. And with that, thank you for your attention and have a nice rest of your day.